Hello, I'm Frodo and this is another budget deck tech. This time we have some real junk coming around. Say hello to my dearest buddy, Murmuring Mystic. If you like to annoy people with spicy control decks, this is something for you. Or if, you have just about 2 event tickets and you want to make yourself a deck that somehow works. I had great fun building and my first deck was mono blue control and I have always loved this archetype. Today we will play tribute to legendary magic card, which is Stormcrow. Of course, our birds are not even close to this power level, but I'll do my best to make a deck that is worthy of this mythic card. I love this deck, hope you'll enjoy it too. Anyway, let's head to the brewery. We'll begin with our namesake card, which is Murmuring Mystic. We play 4 copies of it. Why? Well, for 4 mana we get a 1/5 body which generates 1/1 birds every time we cast an instant or sorcery spell. With lots of cantrips and controlling stuff going around, we can go crazy with this guy. What is pretty important, having 5 at the back makes this creature pretty hard to deal with, and having all these 1/1 blockers gives us time we need to take control over the game. Murmuring Mystic is our main win condition, but the guy isn't alone. The ultimate junk card in this deck is Wind Reader Sphinx. We don't include him in the decklist because of being a huge blocker, but because if it resolves, while we have Murmuring Mystic and a bunch of birds on board, we can outrun every opponent with all these card draws. Remember that we draw not only whenever our birds attack, but whenever any flyer attack. And with all of them flying around in standard decks, it's pretty awesome. It looks janky as hell, but really, if we have some birds to attack with, Sphinx is the guy. We have 2 copies of this card in the main deck, but to get us all working we need some magic to happen. That is why we have a lot of counter magic main deck. Generally we can't allow our opponent to go crazy because our cards that actually do something are pretty expensive. We don't want to cast our Mystic on turn 4 because we need to have some protection for it. We need to survive for many turns. To avoid getting run over by big creatures we have 4 copies of Essence Scatter. It stops nearly everything. Carnage Tyrant, Nezahal and Niv-Mizzet are still a bit of a problem, but we don't see them in the main deck too often. What is more, we also have All-Purpose Wizard's Retort, which kinda cooperates with Mystic as he is a wizard actually. Having 4 copies of it puts us in pretty good spot against control decks. You might also consider Sinister Sabotage in this spot, because we have just 4 wizards. Still, I realize that it's pretty important to have as much mana available as it's possible when we have our Mystic on board. We need it to create more and more birds, that's why I believe Wizard's Retort is just better, even if it doesn't let us surveil. Just as all of these weren't enough, we also play 1 copy of Disdainful Stroke, just to have something against big guys main deck. It's pretty good against the fairy and stuff, Another card that lets us survive longer is Blink of an Eye. It is best to leave it until turn 4 to get a draw out of it. The best way to use it is to bounce annoying stuff our opponent controls, to slow him down a turn and then, next turn, counter the big annoyance. Feels great, believe me. Next card we have is an answer to our biggest problem. We need counter magic and we have a lot of it. But it is important to remember that we have just 1 real win condition and we have to protect it. Sometimes all of our counter spells are not enough. Because of that we have 3 copies of Dive Down to dodge all the removal our opponent would cast to kill the Mystic. Once again, there is an alternative. You might consider Siren Storm Tamer instead of Dive Downs, and the upside is that it just makes Wizard's Retort better. I think Dive Down is better because firstly, it is an instant so it triggers Mystic, and secondly, we need just 1 mana to defend our Mystic. In most of the cases the same goes for Storm Tamer, but if we already have Mystic and then we cast Siren Storm Tamer, we have to keep up 1 mana to have the protection covered. What is more, if we have Storm Tamer, opponent knows what we are up to. Dive Down gives us surprise factor, and that is good enough for me. What's more, it's simply cheaper. It would be great just to counter everything, but sadly it is not possible. Because of that, we need some actual removal, and we haven't much of that stuff in mono blue, don't we? Well, maybe we don't have, but we have Deep Freeze, a card we have a full playset in the decklist. Sadly, it is not an instant or sorcery spell, but it's good enough. We don't mind our opponent having 0-4 blocker, as we plan to attack with flying creatures. For just 3 mana we can get rid of nearly everything, we just have to play it. What we need now is to take over the game, and to do that we need to draw cards. To do this we have full packet of jumpstart draw spells, 4 copies of Radical Idea and 4 copies of Chemisters inside. They are decent cards by themselves, but what is more important is that they can trigger Mystic's ability twice. That's not an opportunity we would like to miss. We've got some topics covered, now let's talk about the last non-land card in the main deck. It is Quasi-Duplicate, and we have 2 copies of it. I would love to include more of them, but sometimes it is just does nothing card. But well, when it does things, it does. We can copy our Mystic with Jumpstart 2 times and create even more birds. If we have Mystic on board and we resolve Quasi-Duplicate, it might be the end of a game. These 2 cards are a perfect match. To cast all this stuff we need some mana. Good thing for us, we are not on a gene beatdown plan, so we can include some colorless awesome lands. Because we do really hate flipped Search for Azcanta, we have 3 copies of Field of Ruin. They are not obligatory, you can cut them if you want to make the deck even cheaper. The land I wouldn't cut is Detection Tower, which helps us to deal with all these hexproof creatures. It is a really budget land and solves many of our problems. We have 3 copies of it. Another must-have is Memorial to Genius. We don't mind having 4 tap lands in control deck, and having additional draw 2 cards is perfectly good for us. We close up the list with the best card in Standard, which is Basic Island. We have 14 copies of it. Having 24 lands with a card that has CMC 7 might seem not to be enough, but actually with all the draw, filtering and stuff we have, 24 lands are perfectly enough. We have just 2 copies of Wind Readers anyway. Now let's head to the sideboard. To complete our counter spells list, against control decks we have 2 copies of Negate. What is more, we have 2 copies of Patient Rebuilding to deal with all these slow strategies. Just remember, never play it against Drake's decks. They love having their stuff in the graveyard. Speaking of them, we have 3 copies of Mistcolor against every Phoenix there is. Works well against both of standard Phoenixes. Against aggressive builds, we have 3 copies of Merfolk Trickster. You have to remember that the creature targeted by our Merfolk loses all abilities, one of them is flying. It's pretty important to keep that in mind. Another anti-aggro card is Sailor of Means, which is surprisingly good card. It ramps us into our more expensive stuff, and it is a decent blocker. We have 2 copies of it. Against token builds we have 2 copies of Crafty Catapults, which can be devastating if our opponent has Divine Visitation or just produces an awful lot of tokens. We want to be in charge of all the tokens, that's it. The last card in the sideboard is an additional copy of Wind Reader Sphinx. It helps us a lot against control decks, so it's good to have one more in the deck, just to be sure one of them hits the battlefield. If you want to upgrade this deck, you probably should add some colors to it. Maybe go Izzet or Grixis to get access to removal of any kind. Still, mono blue version is pretty decent and budget as hell, as you can purchase it for about 2 event tickets. If you want to stay in mono blue version and upgrade this deck in non-budget way, it could probably use some number of mission briefings to cast even more spells. Surveil also helps, as we have as much as 10 jumpstart cards main deck. Another one is the card we miss the most, which is Search for Azcanta. If you have it in your collection, give it a try. It's one of the best cards to play in control decks. And that is all for today's deck tech. Hope you will have fun playing this build. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe buttons down there below. See you soon!